3 years. 3 years since Nora Callahan had let anyone pass the front gate of her property without standing at the window to watch them leave. 3 years of the same sentence, delivered with the same measured calm, the same slight tilt of her chin that closed a door before anyone could think to push it open. I don't need any help, thank you. 6 words. She had worn them smooth as river glass. She watched people absorb them. The neighbors, the casserole carriers, the well-meaning women from her late husband's firm. And she watched them decide, one by one, that she meant it. She did mean it. That was the part no one believed. Until the 3rd or 4th time. Then came the Tuesday in October, when the water heater in her crawl space failed and sent 4 inches of standing water across the utility room floor. Her brother-in-law had given her a name, a contractor. Reliable, he said. Fair, and Respawn. She had written the number on the back of an envelope and set it under a coffee mug for 11 days before. The water stain on the basement drywall grew wide enough to change her mind. Name was Garrett Cole. He arrived in a gray work truck with a cracked passenger mirror and a boy of 9, sitting in the front seat eating a granola bar. Nora had not expected the boy. Garrett had not expected to need to explain him. The school called. At 7 that morning, he said from the porch, lice check. Sent half the 3rd grade home. His voice had the particular flatness of a man who had already run the same problem through every possible solution before he got dressed. He could reschedule if she needed him to. He looked at the boy. The boy looked back at her with the open, uncomplicated assessment of a child who has not yet learned to pretend he isn't looking. What happened to your arm? The boy said. Her left arm ended 4 inches below the elbow, a fact she had arranged her wardrobe and her posture and her daily geography around for 38 months, not to hide. She did not hide it, but to control the timing of. She preferred to be the one who introduced it. I was in an accident, she said. The boy nodded once, satisfied. My dad has a scar on his chin from a table saw, he said. He says it's a reminder to measure twice, Garrett said. Eli, in the low voice of a father who is not yet sure whether an apology is required. It's fine, Nora said. And then, before she had decided to, he can come in. The crawl space access was in the utility room at the back of the house. Garrett went in with a headlamp and a moisture meter, while Eli sat on the bottom step of the basement stairs and ate the second half of the granola bar and looked around the way children look around rooms, not searching for anything, just absorbing. Nora stood in the doorway between the utility room and the main basement and listened to Garrett moving through the dark below the floor joists and tried to remember the last time she had let a stranger into this house for longer than it took to sign a delivery slip. 14 minutes later, Garrett came out of the crawl space with dust in his hair and water stains on both knees and a look on his face that she did not like. The heater itself was the smaller problem, he said. The bigger problem was what he'd found behind it. He took out his phone and showed her the photos. The insulation between the rear foundation wall and the subfloor had been cut away in a precise rectangle, 18 inches by 24. And in the gap behind it, packed tight against the concrete, was something that had no business being in anyone's crawl space. A fireproof document case, locked. Destin. I didn't touch it, Garrett said. I don't know what you want to do. She knew the case. She recognized the size and the color. Dark green. The kind her husband had kept in his home office for documents he called sensitive and never explained further. She had found 3 of them after he died, all in the office, all accounted for in the inventory his estate attorney had catalogued. She had assumed that was all of them. Set it down. She looked at the case for a long moment. "Leave it," she said. "Fix the heater." He did. He worked methodically and without talk, which she appreciated. Eli migrated upstairs at some point, invited or not, and she found him 20 minutes later, sitting at the kitchen table, with a pencil. Filling in the crossword she had left, folded open next to the fruit bowl. He was doing it. With complete authority and getting roughly every 4th answer correct, which struck her as a reasonable average for a 9-year-old. They made coffee. She made coffee. She made him a cup of hot chocolate because she found a box of it at the back of the cabinet, where she kept things that had no clear reason to be saved and an equally clear reasons not to be thrown away. They sat at the kitchen table in a silence that was, against all logic, not uncomfortable. "You do crosswords a lot?" he asked. "Every morning," she said. "My mom used to," he said. He said it the same way he had said the thing about her arm. Plainly, without drama, with the blunt honesty of a child who has learned that soft peddling a fact does not change it. "She died when I was 6. "I'm sorry," Nora said. "Dad says she would have liked puzzles with me if she'd had the chance," he said. He filled in another answer. Confidently wrong. He talks about her like that. Like she's still making plans. Garrett came up from the basement at 11:15. The heater was replaced. He had also resealed the crawl space access and left a written note of 2 other items he'd spotted that would need attention before winter. A cracked sill plate on the north wall and a section of drainage pipe that had shifted enough to pool against the foundation. He had not fixed them because she had not asked him to. He set it down. He handed her the invoice without ceremony. Then he said, "Can I ask you something off the clock?" They sat. She waited. The case in the crawl space. The way it was packed in, that wasn't a hiding spot someone made in a hurry. Whoever put it there took their time. The insulation had been cut with a utility knife and reseated with spray adhesive. From the floor above, you'd never know anything was behind it. Set it down. She had been thinking about nothing else since he came up the stairs. "My husband died 3 years ago," she said. Garrett said nothing, which was the correct response. "Yes." He was a real estate attorney, she said. He handled commercial property transactions, large ones. "I'm not suggesting you have a problem," Garrett said. "I'm suggesting you might want to know what's in the case before you decide you don't." He asked him to stay. She was not certain why. Perhaps because he was the only person in the room who had seen it, and there was a specific loneliness in being the only person who knows a thing. Perhaps because he had a boy at her kitchen table who was currently attempting onomatopoeia in 7 letters and would probably arrive at something close. The case was combination locked. 3 dials. She tried her husband's birthday, his office extension, which he'd used as a code for everything during the first years of their marriage. The year they bought the house. The month and year their daughter was born. The month and year their daughter left for college. The day of the accident. On the 9th try. The date her husband had proposed. A detail so specific she almost hadn't thought of it. The lock released. Inside were 2 items. The first was a manila envelope, sealed, with her name written across the front in her husband's handwriting. The ink was blue. He always used blue. She recognized the particular slant of the N in her name, the way you recognize a voice in the next room, before you've made out the words. The second was a compact flash drive in a Ziploc bag with a strip of blue painter's tape across it. In the same handwriting, Hargrove, full archive. Hargrove was a name she knew. Thomas Hargrove. He had been her husband's largest client, a property developer whose commercial portfolio spread across 6 counties, a man her husband had described. Over 14 years of dinners and passing conversation. As demanding, as occasionally difficult, as extremely well-connected. She had met him twice, once at a firm event, once at the funeral, where he had pressed her hand and told her that her husband was the most ethical man he had ever worked with, and that she should feel proud. She had felt proud. She had not had any reason, until this moment, not to. She did not open the envelope in front of Garrett. She folded her right arm across it, and held it against her chest, and sat at the kitchen table, and breathed in and out, twice, slowly. "I need to know," she said, finally. "Whether this is something I call a lawyer about, or something I call the police about, or something I put back in the crawl space and pretend I didn't find." Garrett leaned back in his chair. He was quiet for a moment in the particular way of a man who is considering what the question is actually asking. He set it down. "That depends on what's in the envelope," he said. "Yes, dear." She opened it. Her husband had written 7 pages by hand. The date at the top of the first page was 14 months before he died. The handwriting was steady on the first 3 pages and changed on the python on the 4th. Not dramatically, but the letters compressed slightly, the way they did when he was tired or upset. She had read enough of his handwriting over 22 years to read what the handwriting itself was saying. He had discovered, over the course of 2 years of transactions, that Thomas Hargrove was moving money through property closings. Just not laundering in the film noir sense. No duffel bags, no cash in walls. Sophisticated, inflated appraisals, straw buyers, shell companies incorporated in Delaware and Wyoming. All of it woven into legitimate transactions with enough separation between layers that no single document told the story. Her husband had told the story. 7 handwritten pages. He had assembled it the way a man assembles a careful argument, chronologically, with citation, with the names of the shell companies and the names behind them, and with a final paragraph that explained why he had not yet gone to the authorities. Because, he wrote, the man who chairs the county ethics board is on Hargrove's payroll, because the firm partner who would ordinarily receive a disclosure of this kind has been Hargrove's personal attorney for 11 years, because the last person who raised a regulatory concern about a Hargrove property, a county assessor, 3 years ago, retired abruptly at 51 and relocated to a state that was not this one. "I am leaving this here," the letter said, "because I do not know yet who is safe to trust with it. I am going to find out, and if you are reading this without having heard from me first, then I did not find out in time." The 7th page was a name and a phone number, federal. 3 letters at the top of the page, same blue ink, the same slant. Nora sat at her kitchen table in the house. She had not left voluntarily in 3 years, and looked at the phone number and felt the room rearrange itself around her. Eli had finished the crossword. He had also, at some point, gotten himself a glass of water and brought one to her, without being asked, and it was sitting on the table next to her elbow. She had not heard him do it. Garrett was reading her face. It's the way a person reads a gauge. "Whatever it is," he said. "You don't have to figure it out in the next 10 minutes. He knew, she said. Her voice came out level, which surprised her. He knew something was wrong, and he hid the evidence, and 3 months later, he drove his car into the median on Route 9 at 2 in the morning. She laid the pages flat on the table. The police report had said distracted driving. The report had noted no mechanical failure, no other vehicles involved, no weather conditions that would explain the loss of control. She had accepted the report. She had accepted all of it. See, Keith, because grief takes everything you have and leaves nothing over for suspicion. Was the accident investigated? Garrett said. Standard report, she said. Closed inside a week. She looked at him. The officer who filed it retired the following year. And Garrett looked at the flash drive in the Ziploc bag on the table. Between them. "Do you have a laptop?" he said. "I do," she said. "And I want you to know that you do not have to stay. You replaced a water heater. This is not what you were asked to come here for." He glanced at the doorway where Eli had wandered. Some minutes ago, into the living room. She could hear the television on low. "I know," he said. "I'm going to stay anyway." They opened the drive. It held 4 years of documentation. Transaction records, email chains, appraisal documents with 2 sets of numbers, wire transfer confirmations. Routed through 3 different institutions, and a subfolder her husband had labeled correspondence. Retain that contained 41 emails between Hargrove and a man identified only as V. Discussing, in language careful enough to be almost clean, the mechanics of what they were doing and what it would yield. She read for 90 minutes. Garrett read alongside her, occasionally asking a question about a term or a name. He had a contractor's literacy with proprietors, property documents. He could not follow every layer of the financial architecture, but he understood square footage. He understood appraisal values. He understood when a number was wrong in the way a structural load is wrong. Not obviously, not catastrophically, but wrong enough that the thing it is holding up will eventually come down. By the time the afternoon light had moved across the kitchen floor from one wall to the other, they had a shape of the thing. 31 properties over 4 years, inflated sales prices, totaling, by her husband's careful arithmetic, $11 million in fictitious equity. Money that existed on paper and then moved in pieces through legitimate business accounts until it became real. Hargrove had a son on the County Planning Commission. Hargrove had a son on the County Planning Commission's roommate sitting had a former college roommate sitting on the State Real Estate Licensing Board Registrars. Singh's board had, according to a single emails in the correspondence folder, in a long-standing relationship with the assistant district attorney who had been in office for the past decade. "I know why he didn't go to the police," Nora said. "Yeah," Garrett said. "I also know why he left it here." She smoothed the last page of the handwritten letter flat against the table with her palm. "He left it for me to find. He knew I would eventually fix the water heater. Sandrine." She paused. "He knew I would not have been able to leave the house to do anything about it myself." Her voice did not break on that. It came close, in the way a beam comes close to its load limit. You can feel the stress without the failure.
Yes, sirs.
She had not left this property voluntarily in 3 years. After the accident, after the surgeries and the rehabilitations and the slow, hard arithmetic of learning to live with one hand, she had built her life so precisely inside these walls that leaving had come to feel not like fear, but like physics. Like there was simply no mechanism for it. She had told herself for 3 years that those were the same thing. She was beginning to understand they were not. The name on the last page, Garrett said carefully. Is that someone you could contact? She looked at the number. The federal designation at the top of the page meant a field office. It meant someone with jurisdiction that ran across county lines, someone who did not owe Thomas Hargrove a favor or a career. He researched it, she said. He left me a name that couldn't be touched locally. Sit down. Your husband sounds like a careful man. He was. Her right hand turned the letter over once on the table. He was careful enough to know he was in over his head, and careful enough to leave me the way out, and not careful enough to keep himself alive, long enough to use it. She said it without inflection. Grief after 3 years has its own temperature. Not cold, not hot, just the particular weight of a fact you have carried long enough that you have stopped feeling it as a weight. What do you want to do? Garrett said. He set it down. It was not the question she expected. She had expected suggestions. She had expected the particular helpfulness that comes with an agenda that shows up in a doorway, with a casserole and a fixed idea of what you need. I want to make the call, she said, but I need to know that I'm not doing it in a way that tells Hargrove first. If any of the people on his payroll get wind of this before the right desk sees it, that drive disappears. And those letters never existed. And I become a widow, with one hand who says her dead husband left her a ghost story. Edison, what do you need? I need to know whether there's a way to transmit what's on that drive securely. And I need to know whether someone's sitting where I'm sitting right now. In a house with no institutional backing, with no idea who else is watching. I need to know whether that is enough to open a federal investigation, or whether it just makes me a target. Yes, Garrett was quiet. I'm a contractor, he said. I'm not a lawyer. I know what you are, she said. I'm not asking you to be one. I'm asking you to stay in the room while I figure out whether I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside the kitchen window, the oak in the backyard had gone the particular yellow of mid-October and was losing leaves in the low wind at a pace that made it look thoughtful. I'll stay, he said. He called the number. A woman answered on the 4th ring. Not a receptionist, a person. Not a receptionist, a person, which was what her husband's note had implied. Nora gave her name. She said she had documentation relating to a real estate fraud scheme that had been assembled by her late husband, an attorney, who she had reason to believe had not died accidentally. She said it in the same flat voice she used for everything. Flat. Not because she felt flat, but because she had learned over 3 years that a flat voice was taken seriously, and a voice that wavered was taken as a symptom. The woman on the phone asked 3 questions. She then asked Nora not to move the physical documents or the drive, not to discuss the contents with anyone outside this call, and not to open her front door to anyone she had not already agreed to receive. Someone will be at your address, the woman said, within 4 hours. I need to ask you something, Nora said. The field office in this county, is it separate From the DA's office? Completely, the woman said. The name I was given, the name on my husband's note, is that person still at your office? A brief pause. That person is who I'm going to call next, the woman said. Just set it down. Nora set the phone down on the table. Garrett had made fresh coffee at some point. There was a mug beside her elbow. She had not heard him do that either. She was beginning to think she had underestimated what it cost to notice things. Over 3 years of being alone in a house, and having no one to not notice. Eli appeared in the doorway. He had, at some point during the past 2 hours, found her bookshelf in the living room, and helped himself to a field guide to North American birds that had been her husband's. He held it now with the careful grip of a child who understands that a book is someone else's property. Can I look at this? He asked. I already am, but I'm asking. Yes, she said. There's a red-tailed hawk in your backyard, he said. I've been watching it for 20 minutes. I think it has something. She looked at her son. She caught the thought before it finished and rearranged it. She looked at the boy. 20 minutes ago, she had not known his name. Okay. My husband used to watch the hawks, she said. Sit down. My mom used to watch the birds at the feeder, Eli said. He held the field guide open to a page of raptors and brought it to her side of the table and set it down next to the coffee mug so she could see the illustration. I think it's this one. It was, exactly. Ghost. They waited. Garrett patched the cracked sill plate on the north wall because the materials were in his truck. And it would take him 40 minutes. And it was better to work than to sit still in someone else's emergency. Eli made a list in the back of the crossword of every bird sauce he saw through the kitchen window in careful 9-year-old printing, with a column for the time. No. At 4:17, Toogles pulled up to the gate. Nora buzzed them through from the panel by the door. She had not used the gate release in 8 months. The agents took the documents in the drive. They took her statement, which lasted 2 hours, and covered everything from the letter to the crawl space, to the phone call, to the names. On Hargrove's payroll, they were careful with her, not careful in the way people were careful with her. About the arm, or about the loss, or about the years she had spent inside this house. Careful in the way people are careful with a source. Precise. Professional, treating the information she held as the valuable thing in the room, which it was. That signed his own. Before they left, the senior agent told her that Hargrove's name had appeared in an adjacent investigation 8 months earlier. That the materials her husband had assembled were, in the agent's word, corroborating. That the probability of this going somewhere was, in their assessment, high. She did not ask what would happen to her. She understood by then what her husband had understood. Once the right people have the right documents, the question of what happens to you stops being the most important question in the room. After they left, the house was very quiet, in the way. Houses are quiet after a thing has happened in them. Garrett stood in the kitchen doorway. Eli was asleep on the couch in the living room, with the field guide open across his chest. You should go, Nora said. You've been here for 9 hours. I know, Garrett said. I mean it. I know you mean it. He did not move. How long has it been since you left? He looked at the front door. 3 years, 2 months, 11 days, but she did not say that. A while, she said. The gate works, he said. I tested it when I let the agents in. She almost said. That's not the problem. she did not. Because it would have required her to explain what the problem actually was. And she was too tired for that, and also because he already knew. She could see that he already knew, in the same way he had known what the numbers in the appraisal documents meant without needing her to explain the mechanism. They set it down. "I have a daughter," she said instead. "She's 22. She's been calling me every Sunday for 3 years, and coming home twice a year, and pretending she doesn't notice that the radius of her mother's life has been shrinking one room at a time."
What does she say?
What does she say? She says she loves me. Nora's thumb moved once against the rim of the coffee mug. She doesn't say, "Come out." She's too smart for that.
That is fine.
She sounds like her father, Garrett said. Something in Nora's chest shifted by a single notch, the way a joint settles when weight is redistributed correctly. She had not expected to feel that. She had stopped expecting most things. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "I have to call her and tell her what I found in the crawl space." That sounds like a long call. It will be. She set the mug down. She's going to want to drive up. Probably. And when she gets here, I am going to have to stand in the driveway to meet her. She looked at the door again. Not the way she had been looking at it for 3 years. As a boundary, as an edge. As the place where her life ended and the rest of the world began. She looked at it the way you look at a door when you are deciding to open it. I have not been in the driveway since the spring she left for college. Garrett did not say anything reassuring. She respected that. There was nothing reassuring to say that was also true, and he seemed to understand that distinction.
My daughter's name is June,
Nora said. She was named for the month she was born, which her father said was completely unimaginative and also completely correct.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good name, Garrett said. It is. She looked at the field guide open on Eli's sleeping chest. Your son is going to be cold in about an hour. I know. Garrett pushed off from the doorframe. I'll get him. He walked him to the front door. She did not think about it, which was the only way it was possible to do it. Not as a decision, but as a next step. Then a next step, the way you get through the first months after a loss. She opened the door. The October air came in, cold and clean and smelling like fallen leaves and the particular sharpness of a night that has just begun. She stood in the doorway. She was aware that she was standing in the doorway. She was aware that the porch was 6 feet beyond the threshold, and the front walks was 6 feet beyond the porch, and the driveway gate was 60 feet beyond the walk, and that in the morning, when June's car pulled up, she would have to close every one of those gaps. Garrett carried Eli out in the practiced way of a man who has been carrying a sleeping child for years, with one arm under the knees, and the boy's head against his shoulder, the field guide tucked under his arm. He stopped on the porch. Eli slept on thoroughly. He does this anywhere, Garrett said, by way of no particular explanation. I noticed, she said. He went down the front steps. She watched him go. Eli did not wake when Garrett settled him into the back seat, did not wake when the truck door closed, did not wake when the engine turned over on the first try. SS. Garrett rolled down the window before he pulled away. The cracked sill plate will hold through winter, he said. But the drainage pipe needs to be done before the ground freezes. I'll call you, she said. He lifted 2 fingers off the steering wheel in the way of a man who is not a waving type and pulled out of the drive. As she stood in the open doorway of her house and watched the taillights disappear around the bend in the road. The night air moved against her face. The oak in the backyard was invisible in the dark, but she could hear it shedding leaves into the dry grass below. Somewhere out past the tree line, a dog was barking at something, and the sound carried clean and far in the cold. He set it down. She stood there for longer than she had intended. Then she went inside, left the front door open for 30 more seconds, in the specific and deliberate way of a woman testing the weight of a thing she has been afraid of, and finally closed it. She called June at 9 o'clock. The phone rang twice. "Mom," June said, "is everything okay?" "I found something today," Nora said. "It's going to take a while to explain. Do you have time?" A brief pause. Then the sound of a door closing, background noise falling away, her daughter settling in. "I have all night," June said. She told her. She told her everything, from the contractor's name on the envelope. Her brother-in-law had given her, the boy, who had asked about her arm with the frank curiosity of someone who did not know yet that such questions were complicated, to the case behind the insulation, to the 7 handwritten pages, to the federal agent's careful hands on her husband's documents, to the moment she had stood in her own doorway and let the cold air touch her face. June was quiet for most of it. She asked 2 questions, both good ones. When Nora finished, the phone was quiet for a moment. "I'm coming up," June said. "I know," Nora said. "I'll be there by noon." "I'll be in the driveway," Nora said. And then, before June could respond, "Don't make it a thing." "I won't make it a thing," June said, in the voice of someone who was absolutely going to make it a thing. Quietly, to herself, in the car, the whole drive up. "Good," Nora said. After she hung up. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The crossword was still there. Eli's confident wrong answers, filled in beside her careful right ones. She picked up a pencil and corrected 2 of his, then thought about it, and erased them and put his answers back. It seemed like the right thing to do. It sucked to sit neem. In the morning, she called Garrett to schedule the drainage pipe. She made the call at 7:15, standing at the kitchen window with her coffee, watching the empty bird feeder at the edge of the yard that she had not filled since she stopped going outside. She put on her coat after she hung up. She found the birdseed in the saraj. She walked out the back door and down the 3 steps of the porch, and across the grass, wet with the first frost, to the feeder at the edge of the yard. She filled it. She stood there in the cold for a moment, looking out at the tree line, at the October sky, going pale above it, at the yard she had been watching for 3 years from the other side of glass. Then she went back inside because it was cold, and because June was coming at noon, and because there were things to do. Set it down, but she did not lock the door behind her. I keep thinking about the bird feeder. The one Nora hadn't filled in 3 years, because filling it meant walking outside, and walking outside meant crossing a line she had drawn so quietly, so gradually, that she'd stopped seeing it as a choice. She thought it was just how things as a lot of us do that. We mistake the walls we built for the shape of the world. What struck me about Nora's story wasn't the crawl space, or the locked case, or even the 7 handwritten pages her husband left behind.
Dick.
It was the sequence of causes that made all of it possible. Her husband saw something wrong, and chose to document it carefully instead of looking away. Not because he was fearless, but because he understood that integrity doesn't negotiate with convenience. That decision, made quietly in a study 14 months before he died, was the reason 2 federal agents were sitting at his wife's kitchen table 3 years later. The right thing done in private doesn't disappear. It waits. And Garrett. Here's what I think about Garrett. He was just a contractor who showed up to replace a water heater. He had every reason to close the crawl space, hand her the invoice, and drive home. Instead, he said what he saw, stayed when she asked, and kept working while she made the hardest phone call of her life. Not because he had any stake in the outcome, but because that's what a person with a straight moral compass does when the situation asks something of them. He didn't perform helpfulness. He just didn't leave. There's a difference, and most people feel it immediately, even if they can't name it. Eli, though. Eli is the one I come back to. 9 years old, eating a granola bar, asking a stranger about her arm with the kind of directness that adults spend decades learning to suppress. He didn't know he was doing anything. He was just being honest. The way children are honest before the world teaches them that honesty requires permission, and that single unself-conscious question cracked something open in Nora that 3 years of careful neighbors and twice yearly visits from her daughter hadn't touched. Intelligence isn't only the ability to analyze. It's also the ability to see clearly without flinching, and Eli saw clearly without even trying. Nora herself had the hardest job. She had to be willing, after 3 years of building a life that fit inside 4 walls, to pick up a phone and say, "My husband did not die accidentally, and I have the proof, and I need someone to help me do something about it." That takes a particular kind of resolve, the kind that doesn't announce itself, doesn't feel like courage in the moment, just feels like the next necessary thing. She did it while exhausted. She did it while afraid. She did it anyway. The causes line up when you look back at them. A man chose honesty over ease. A contractor chose to stay. A boy asked a real question. A woman chose to open a door she hadn't opened in 3 years. Each one of those choices required something: decency, or clear-eyed thinking, or the stubbornness to keep going when stopping would have been so much simpler. I don't think those qualities are rare. I think they get quiet in us when life gets hard enough, long enough. What I take from Nora's story is that they don't disappear. They wait. The way her husband's documents waited, until someone or something creates the conditions for them to matter again. The bird feeder was full by the time June arrived. That's the part I can't stop thinking about.